Hey, what's up, you guys? So, what we're going to be talking about today is how your thoughts are messed up. How your thoughts will tell you things that are just not true. And if you really take the time to evaluate and have discernment about your thoughts, you'll start seeing that none of these thoughts that you're having are real. And I want you to almost imagine a person that's angry. And I want you to imagine this person that's been angry at you. And I want you to tell me if you see this pattern. Do you see the pattern of irrationality? Do you see the pattern of them just trying to get their point across? Do you see the pattern of them blocking out what you're saying? Do you see the pattern of them distorting what they're saying just so they can get their point? Now, it's cool. You're angry. It's necessary. We all get angry. There's nothing, it's not a bad thing to be angry. But if you look at it, there's no truth that you're speaking about when you're getting angry. I remember there was a time where I was at the park and this person was like, I just want to murder that person. There's a sense of exaggeration when you're angry. And these thoughts that get implanted inside of your head, if you really look at those thoughts, what if you started identifying with those thoughts? I remember a person sharing something very vulnerable to me about basically killing something. They wanted to kill an object. And this was a thought that got implanted inside of their heads. And if you really look at that thought, what if we started identifying with those thoughts? What if we started identifying with the thoughts of trying to murder something? And you see that, and you're like, heck no, I don't want to identify with that. That's not who I am. That's not the kind of person that I want to come across as, right? So because we have awareness, because we have discernment, we can identify what is a messed up thought and what is not a messed up thought, and not be in this state of thinking that we need to kill somebody, right? So that's the thing. And the saddest thing is that there are some thoughts that get placed and implanted and shown up inside of our heads that are easily identifiable. For example, that thought of not being enough, that thought of feeling insufficient. It seems so real. You feel the emotion. That's how your reality looks like right now. And that's the most realist belief that you can have about yourself, because that's how your behaviors show up. That's how your personality shows up in the situation. So that thought of not being enough got implanted inside of your head. And now you believe that thought to be true. You act it out. It's whacked out. But what's the difference between the thought of not being enough and the thought of murdering someone? What's the difference? The difference is that one thought a person can easily identify with. For example, being shy. I'm shy. A person can easily identify with being shy. A person can't easily identify with being a murderer. So that's why, because we have social constructs and social conditioning that tells us being a murderer is bad, we can easily disidentify from that messed up thought. But not being enough is also a messed up thought. But here's the thing, there are no social constructs, there's no legal constructs, there's no governmental constructs that say you shouldn't feel not enough. There's no law that says you shouldn't feel not enough. So not being enough, being shy, is acceptable. It's acceptable to have that thought. And there's an infinite amount of thoughts that get plugged inside of our heads that are not true, but we choose to identify with it, and we choose to act out on those behaviors, and what happens is that the result of it isn't so good, isn't so bueno. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about thoughts that really distort your perception, that really distort your assessment of situations, that distort who you are as a person, and really takes you away from getting the results that you want socially. Okay? The emotion of guilt. This emotion, you can feel it inside of your body. It's dense. We feel it when we make a mistake. Now, guilt is impractical. It doesn't make any sense for you to feel guilty, yet we still feel it. Because let's say you're going up to a person. Let's say you're approaching a person. And as you're approaching that person, you make a mistake. You say the wrong thing. Okay? Okay, you said the wrong thing. What's going to happen? And then, because you said the wrong thing, they don't want to talk to you anymore. They leave the situation. Are you going to be dwelling about that mistake the whole time in the process of trying to engage and interact with new people? So if you feel that sense of guilt, that guilt is actually sabotaging you from continuing and productively being able to engage with new people, being able to socialize with new people, because you have this sense of guilt, because I made that one mistake. So we latch onto it. We become a narcissist about it. We become all about me, 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 me. I made that mistake. Me made that mistake. Me made that mistake. And you loop it inside of your mind. And as you loop it inside of your mind, what do you pay attention to? You're not paying attention to everything else. You're not assessing everything else. You're just looking at yourself. You're looking at me, my world, right? So that's the thing about guilt. We think guilt is gonna actually get us somewhere. We think, okay, if I shame myself, if I beat myself up, I won't make that same mistake. But as you're beating yourself up, you're losing opportunities to be productive. You're losing opportunities to engage with that new person. And here's the thing, on the process of your journey, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make this mistake and this mistake and this mistake and this mistake. It is inevitable. Okay? So the emotion of guilt makes no sense. And if you sense the energy of it, it's a lower energy. It's a lower vibration. It's a lower feeling. It's a dense feeling. It's a dark feeling. It's a feeling of stuck. It's a feeling of me, 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 me. That's the feeling. So get attuned to that energy and have an intuition about it. Because these are the energies that are going to subtly sabotage you and plant thoughts inside of your head that you think are in your best interest, but are not. Because if you look at the thought itself, it seems like it's in your best interest. So you identify with that thought a little bit. That's what happens. But if you look at the energy behind the thought, it's weakening you. It's making you less productive. It's making you focus on yourself and not everything else. And you can't really assess situations if you're just focusing on yourself. Are you catching the vibes yet? Are you catching the flow? Second energy, it's the energy of grief. Now, I'm not a person that's been through a lot, or I've had moments where I've grieved before. I remember being in jail and trespassing a school, making YouTube videos and all that stuff. There was a moment of grief there, but the biggest moments of grief, especially at my age, are the moments when you get rejected. I remember asking out a girl in 8th grade in front of the whole classroom, and she said maybe in front of the classroom. And then after the school day went over, she calls me, hey, we can't do this. And there was a true sense of grief, because there was a feeling like you lost something. Like, oh my gosh, I lost you. Now, if I look at the rationality of it, I didn't lose anything. Now, what happens is that in my mind, I feel like I've gained something. But then in the process of gaining this thing, I never owned her. I never... But I feel like I still felt like I lost something. I felt like I lost my self-esteem. I felt like I lost my sense of confidence. I felt like I lost everything that I thought I was. And the mistake here is thinking that everything is to gain is outside of you. No, everything to gain is inside of you. What does that mean? When you look at your energy, the only thing that you have complete control of is your energy. So if I'm intuitively managing my energy, am I in the energy of contentment and peace and compassion and love? Or am I in the energy of shame and guilt and fear and wanting and needing, right? Which energy am I in? And that is what I have control about. So whatever happens in the external world, if I get rejected, if that person doesn't want to be with anymore, if we're not compatible, there's an easy sense of grief. We can grieve about it. Oh my gosh, I lost something. But here's the thing. You can choose for yourself to be happy in here. Because if you rely on the external world for your happiness, then you are vulnerable to grief. You're vulnerable to deep feelings of sadness. And you rely on you getting that object and you getting that thing to give you your sense of happiness, only to realize you're still not happy. So happiness is within. So as I look within, I manage and I'm examining my energy. Where is my energy at? Is my energy lower? Is my energy physiologically weakening me? Or is my energy physiologically strengthening me? And if it's weakening me, it's time for me to be intuitive and almost be in a meditative state to get this energy from physiologically weakening me and letting go of the payoff of getting that, and going into energy states that physiologically support me and build me up. Okay. So that's why grief doesn't make sense, because now you're relying on the chaotic external world, the external world that you have no control over. You're relying on that for your own happiness. And it's the same with approaching. You have no control over how people are going to respond to you, how people are going to react to you. You have no control over that. The only thing that you have control of is making the courageous decision for yourself. That's all you have control over. But you have no control over the external situation. So it's an inaccurate view of reality if you think you have control over others. So that's why grief doesn't make sense. But we continue to be in a state of grief. The emotion of fear. Fear will plug in the most logical, good-intentioned thoughts inside of your head. But if you look at it from a neutral perspective, they make no sense whatsoever. For example, there's a sense of fear of not wanting to bother people. That's like the biggest thought that everybody has when going up to a stranger. They don't want to bother people. That's the biggest thing. Now, that if you look at the thought itself, it's a very acceptable thought. It's a very good intentioned thought. It's a very nice thought to have. But if you look at it, that's not how the social world operates. The social world is like a magnet. You're this magnet with an infinite amount of components, and there's another magnet with an infinite amount of components. Now, the first component that you guys are testing is, do you attract each other or do you repel each other? The first component is this person in a social mindset at this moment and in this instance? If they're not, then they will be repelled from you. If they are, they will continue with you. And what you're doing as a magnet, you're testing if they are coming towards you or are they being repelled by you, right? So if you have social intelligence, if they're being repelled by you, why are you continuing to be that magnet that keeps going towards them and continuing to repel them? Intuitively, you'll recognize that what you do is that if they're repelled by you, you go back. It's like this. So bothering people is when you're this magnet and they're being slightly repelled by you and you're continuing to go chase them. And that's what a magnet is. Okay? That's what bothering people is. Not what a magnet is, but that's what bothering people is. But if you don't want to bother people, right, this is how you do it. You test it. If they get repelled, you leave. You test it. If they get attracted, you stay. And then you kind of continue going forward. Okay? That is how you get a social interaction. Now, a person will think, I don't really want to bother them, but you don't know if they're attracted or repelled by you. You don't know that. You haven't gauged it. So you can't say for sure if they're really bothering you as a person. How do I know this? Because after making a shitload of courageous decisions of actually going up to people, I'm able to assess reality correctly. But if you're not doing that, basically you're submerging yourself in this mindset that never worked in the first place. If you never approached a person, you can't just say, oh, I don't want to bother people, because what's happening is that you're relying on the old conditioning inside of your head. You're relying on those old thought forms and those old thought patterns that are being implanted inside of your head in order for you to assess the situation, not recognizing and having no discernment that those thoughts are not true. But we like to easily believe in that. We like to have that thought, oh, I don't want to bother them, because there's a sense of relief. There's a sense of, oh, I can stay in my comfort zone. That's why we hold on to those thoughts. That's why we hold on to thoughts like that. And plus it makes us feel like we didn't do anything bad, you know? So that's the thing about fear. We have to really examine fear, and we have to examine the energy of fear constantly, because the energy will place a thought inside of your head, then will place take it back. The energy of fear will place a thought inside of your head, and the decision is, are you going to identify with that thought, or are you not going to identify with that thought? Because that's why we have to recognize the energies flowing through us inside of ourselves constantly. Because these energies will produce an infinite amount of conditions and thoughts as to why we shouldn't do it, as to why we shouldn't take action. It'll produce an infinite amount of thoughts, and these thoughts will sound so nice. They'll be disguised in niceness, but slowly it's making you suffer. And that's what fear is. Okay? So don't let that fear prevent you from going up to that person. And in the next video, I'll be showing you what is a realistic way of looking at our social world. What is a realistic way of looking at social reality? The next energy is desire. It's lust. It's greed, right? You hear these terminologies and you're like, oh, this is kind of religious. Maybe. Let's just go with desire. Lust. Lust energy, it's interesting. It's affected me in very messed up ways. Right now, it's very acceptable and permissible for me to lust after a girl. If I'm straight, it's very permissible for me to lust after a girl. It's very permissible for that. And my body responds in that way. And, yeah. But, you know, if you really think about it, there's been moments where I tried humping my pillow. I tried humping my bed. I tried humping my... Yeah, I tried humping that. So, you know, why is my body responding to a pillow in a bed if I like girls? Why is my body responding to that? Huh. And you kind of think about it, you're like, what is lust energy? And I received this idea that lust energy is indiscriminate. All you need is basically an image inside of your head, and that image will basically get you on. That's it. That's all you need. So the thing is that what it's doing is just kind of like grief. It's looking for things in the outside world to receive pleasure from instead of yourself. You can't create that pleasure. You need your body to be able to create pleasure for yourself. Lust is a very deep topic for me. For example, I have to disidentify from my body to be able to be in control of lust. Because I remember I had this dream one time, and I was thinking to myself, I have my hands right here. And I wake up and I remember having like cum in my pants after a dream. But my hands are right here. And what was really trippy is that I did not use my hands to jerk me off. I did not use my body to jerk myself off. My mind did that. In my dream, I came. So what that made me recognize is that my body is not responding to this lust thing. It is my mind that is making me feel lustful in this situation and making me come in this situation. I thought I needed physical contact and physical sensations stroking me in order for me to come. But I didn't need that. My mind did that for me. And that's what made me recognize, wait, lust is something not what I thought it was. How did my mind allow me to do that and not my actual physical body? So we actually have complete control over ourselves through our minds. And we have the ability to let go of energies, lust that's dysfunctional, that's taking you away from your happiness. It's making you think that happiness is outside of you, not recognizing that you have complete control over it. And also, what happens is that you're in a constant state of frustration, because if you don't have it 75% of the time, you're frustrated because you don't have it. Oh, I don't have this. I don't have that girl. I don't have that experience. I don't have that intimacy. I don't have that sexuality. I don't have that. Right? So in the process, you're like, I don't have it. I don't have it. I don't have it for 75% of the time. And you lose happiness 75% of the time. And then 25% of the time, you may get it. You may get that experience. And then what happens? The starvation goes again, the cycle goes again. So after you get it, you're like, oh, I have to get another one. I have to get another quick hit. I have to get another piece of pleasure outside of me. And then you go more into that deep frustration again. And it becomes this cycle that isn't supportive. So the thing about lust is that it implants thoughts that are not true inside of your head. And as we identify with it, we go more down the rabbit hole and we don't really see the world for what it really is. The world becomes false in a way, right? Most of our thoughts about lust isn't true, right? Like, for example, oh, I want to have a sexual experience. No, you don't. You just want that feeling of happiness. Not recognizing that you can generate that happiness for yourself. Not recognizing through a meditative state you can generate that feeling of peace that you're truly yearning for. And not be in this chasing mode of chasing the external that is uncontrollable and will lead to definite frustration. So it's not a good source of happiness. It's impractical. Yet we still want it. Yet getting the approval and the validation and getting guys being like, hey, you get girls is good enough for you, right? we'll go more into this because this is a deep topic of mine. After desire is the energy of anger. And I talked a little bit about this, and you know, every time I meet an angry person, they have a tendency to be in a state of condemnation. They want to condemn the F out of you. There's this thing wrong about you. There's this thing wrong about you. There's this thing wrong about you, right? But they can't really see you from a neutral perspective. They can't really see, you know what? There's this thing wrong about you, but there's this thing that's really cool about you, right? They can't see it neutrally, right? So when you're in a state of anger, you can't really assess a person correctly. You just see all their flaws, but you don't see neutrally what they are. And that's what anger does. So in the process of being social, you get angry that a person rejected you. You're like, I hate that person for rejecting me. They shouldn't have done that, da-da-da-da-da. But you don't recognize that maybe they needed to do something. Maybe they had a personal situation that was going on with them. Or maybe they just didn't like your vibe at the time, right? And we have a tendency to take that personally. We're like, oh, that person shouldn't have done that. This person shouldn't have, like, oh, fuck it, effing bitch, effing cunt, effing brrr, all these different words, right? We have a tendency to place those labels onto them. And that's what happens when you keep looking for external validation and not being in a meditative state and recognizing all that validation, all that love that you're looking for is in here. So meditate, get into that state, okay? So that's why anger doesn't allow you to assess the situation appropriately, especially when approaching people. So there's no reason for you to be angry because that anger is going to be the main blocking point of you actually engaging with people. So what happens is that when a person gets angry, it's like, oh, this person is a bitch, and that thought gets implanted inside of their head, right? And then now in the process of approaching all these different people and now engaging with all these different people, people respond to them in a way where it reinforces that belief. And then now that belief becomes their identity. That falseness becomes who they are. And that's kind of like to be in a person that's in a state of anger because they view everybody as a bitch. Come on. Why? Right? That's not a productive view of looking at reality and actually being able to engage with a lot of people and really creating the social life that you want. Social skills is actually, if you really want to simplify it, it's love. It's being able to love each other. It's being able to have compassion for each other. It's being able to see one another for who they really are. Okay, that's what social skills is. Simplistically. So anger makes no sense. Next energy, right, is pride. It's a feeling like you're above people, right? And, you know, this comes in the form of, I remember I felt insufficient at times, right? I felt so insufficient in my my ability to have sex with people. I felt so insufficient about that. And what happened is that in high school, I was like, you know, I'm gonna show people like this blowjob video of me, which was really actually my friend. So now there was a sense of confidence of like, oh shit, look, I got a blowjob. That doesn't mean I'm lower than you. And it now means I'm like, pride really, what it really is, you know, it's a form of insufficiency. It's a form of, you know, I feel very insufficient about myself, so I'm gonna have to show these qualities about myself that show others these qualities about myself in order for me to get some sense of approval and some sense of validation and some sense of, right, whatever. Like sometimes there'll be moments where it's not necessary for me to for me to say a big word, for me to say an intellectual word. Now, sometimes I just speak intellectually because it just comes naturally, right? But sometimes I'll notice moments where I'll say like big intellectual words because I know it will be impressive. Sometimes I'll do that. And that's a form of pride. It's called intellectual pride. So you're feeding off of what people are impressed by. And because you're feeding off of that, boom, you use that to build this insufficiency that you have. And, it becomes impractical because it's like, what if they don't understand the word? What if what I'm saying doesn't actually make any sense to them and I can't really get my message across? So I use my intellectualness, I use my big words, and now it kind of distorted the meaning of what I was truly trying to say, right? So that's where intellectual pride can get in the way. Or how about moral superiority, right? Oh, I'm better than them at this. Like, oh, that person is smoking, or that person is that person doesn't seem like a good person. That person seems like a douchebag. That person seems like this. That person seems like this. So what happens is that before you even go up to that person, you judge them. You judge who they are. And that gives you a sense of superiority, right? So instead of dealing with your fear, instead of just submerging yourself into that fear and going into a state of courage, you're like, you know what, I'm gonna stay prideful, not go up to them and recognize that I'm better than them. And that's what happens when you don't go up to a lot of people. You create this stigma of pride, because it's like, the reason, like, you make it so weird. Like, the reason why I'm not going up to this person because that person has this quality. I don't like that, right? I don't like that quality. So there's a sense of pride that's going on there. What it really is that you just can't go up to that person, and now you need to conceptualize this story, this narrative inside of your head as to how you're better than them, in order for you to rationalize to yourself that going up to them isn't the best idea, okay? So that's the thing about pride. It makes no sense in the process of actually approaching people and interacting with people. So why be prideful? Why feel like you're above people? Makes no sense. Yet we still do it. Yet we still have it. Because it's a protection mechanism. It's a protection mechanism from recognizing, shit, there's some insufficiencies about ourselves. Let's meditate and let go of those insufficiencies, and then go with the process and be in that courageous state of approaching people, right? So that's the thing. That's the thing about identifying with thoughts that are not true. These are the main energies. These are the main lower vibrational energies that just implant thoughts inside of our head and makes us assess situations so inaccurately, yet we still believe in them because these thoughts are manipulative as heck. These thoughts we assume to be true, but we don't have the ability to discern our energy to the point where it's like, oh, this energy is producing thoughts inside of my head that aren't true. We don't have that discernment. So that's why we have to be able to cultivate that discernment in order for us to stop identifying with those thoughts that are just not true, okay? Now, what are the energies that are gonna allow you to really assess the situation properly? That's what we're gonna be talking about next. Those are the energies of courage. Those are the energies of love. Those are the energies of joy. Those are the energies of peace. Those are gonna be the energies that are gonna allow you to assess the situation much more properly, and we're gonna be talking about that. But the main message that I want to get out of here is that there are so many energies influencing us that we don't recognize, that are implanting messed up thoughts inside of our heads, and some thoughts that we choose to identify with that are really sabotaging our social experiences and our social abilities. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys truly enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment on this video. And peace out, you guys.